Today's conveyancing clients expect speed, clarity, and frequent updates. But tight margins and rising client expectations put pressure on conveyancing practices. With smart automation and clear workflows, Leap helps conveyancing teams spend less time on admin and more time supporting their clients. Learn more at leap.co.uk.
You're listening to the Today's Conveyancer podcast, the leading source of information for residential property lawyers in England and Wales. Don't forget to subscribe and sign up to our free newsletter at todaysconveyancer.co.uk. You can also follow us on LinkedIn and Twitter.
Hello, welcome along to the latest Today's Conveyancer podcast. I am delighted to say that we have two of probably the most opinionated people in the property industry on the podcast today. Peter Ambrose, Managing Director of the Partnership and a former podcast guest. Delighted to welcome another former podcast guest as well. I think you were podcast number 3 or 4 actually, Russell, going back quite a few years. Russell Quirk, co-founder and director of Proper PR. I said that before we started the recording, I said to them both that my role here is either to referee or alternatively to throw a grenade and just put myself on mute for the next hour. But we're going to try and tackle some of the challenges that conveyancing faces. Both of you are very welcome, and thank you very much indeed for joining.
Pleasure. Thanks for having us. I'm surprised you've had me back. If you've had me on once before, that's a first. I normally get asked, then they say, you can't come back again. But anyway, thank you.
I don't know really where to start here in some respects. I suggested that we might do a position statement about what the challenges of the home buying and selling market are in January 2026. Peter, I don't know whether I know that you're very opinionated on sort of what the conveyancing market needs and some of the challenges it faces. But where are we as things stand on the 3rd of February is the day that we're recording.
Better than January. Turns out January was a bit of a nightmare. All those people that didn't get through in December decided to take it out of us in January, and I've spoken to a lot of lawyers that said the same. It was a very difficult month for the increase in demands of clients, concerns that things weren't going to get done on time and so forth. I think we stand today as we're going into this miserable start of the year with horrible weather and everyone's fed up and agents are relatively quiet, with more pressure on existing deals and more people more aggy and more argumentative than ever before. I think it's a bit like 2025, which was not a vintage year, but just getting a little bit worse.
Russell, do you see the market in the same position?
Well, I see it from, I guess, even though I'm not now an estate agent, I have been variously for 25 years on and off. So I always see this through the estate agent's eyes, mainly because I guess I'm affiliated to many, but also because that's what I would call the coalface, I guess. It's the estate agent that sees the real kind of litmus test of how the market's doing, because they see, the initial valuation inquiry that may or may not turn into a listing, that then may or may not get loads of viewings and ultimately sell / complete. And they obviously see the demand side from buyers, from applicants. And I think when it comes to talking about what the market's doing, so what's 2026 doing, we really need to separate the noise and the rhetoric from the reality. And I guess, look, that applies to a lot of things, certainly our politics at the moment, guys. But I hear a lot on social media and people that I see and speak to and bump into, people that ask me for advice, believe it or not. Quite why they do that, I don't know. But I hear the rhetoric, which is everything's terrible. Market's awful. Nothing's selling. My house has been on the market for months. My neighbour can't sell his house and so on. When you actually look at the data, so whether it be stuff that arises from completions, so things like mortgage funding data, or I guess further up the funnel, mortgage approval data, but also the stuff that's happening as reported by people like 20CI and 20EA, Christopher Watkin, people like that, where you actually note that the market, whatever that means, I'll come back to that in a sec, the market is buoyant. So there are buyers, there are sellers, stuff is happening. But there's multiple markets now. And we used to talk about the north-south divide. Do you remember that? Which people don't talk about anymore. But there's now a north-south divide in price terms. So if you are an agent, a seller, a buyer, a conveyancer, mortgage broker, that is focused on what I guess you'd call the top end. So anything that's kind of £1.5 to £2 million above, I think it's really hard. It's a real struggle. Anything under that seems to be pretty good in terms of sentiment, transaction volume, and so on, but entirely dependent on the seller being realistic about the price that they initially market at, and also the estate agent not doing what is so prevalent now. And don't worry, Peter, I'm going to have a pop at conveyancers, but I'm also going to have a pop at estate agents. So I'm going to be balanced. Ofcom will love this. Ofcom will love this. Some estate agents are really lazy, really backward, and do not know what it is to be an estate agent, in the sense that many of us of a certain age do, when it comes to, ring outs and spinning viewings into valuations, all these things that those words just now, by the way, probably don't make any sense to any estate agent under the age of 30, but they should, because you've now got a tendency for agents to rock up to take the order, so to speak, in terms of the listing, and also, in order to get the listing, cut their fee and increase their perceived value, their estimate, their valuation of that property, in order to flatter the seller into selling with them. And it's put the property industry, I think, in a really bad place, where, the old adage about not being able to trust estate agents, I'm afraid to a large extent, and not every estate agent by any stretch, but to a large extent, that's true, because many of them just aren't doing the job very well. But despite that, and despite Rachel Reeves' very best attempts, how long did that take me to get into politics? Yeah, not long. Rachel Reeves' very best attempts to absolutely destroy the British economy, the UK market generally the property market is faring pretty resiliently. So that's my take, I think, as we sit here, 5 weeks into the new year.
I'm glad you got to the point so quickly, Russell.
Well, I can carry on. It can just be the Russell show, Peter.
If agents are in a position where they're struggling on fees and really finding themselves in a situation where, perhaps whether it's through lack of experience or expertise, that they're not particularly good at that whole sales process, then I think that's probably a challenge that could be leveled at conveyancers as well, isn't it, Peter? We're simply not charging enough for our services, and therefore, by extension, a little like agents, we're struggling to deliver the service.
I think it's a combination of factors. Certainly we don't charge enough, and I think we could talk for a long time about that. In fact, we should. There's a lot of myths about conveyancers leaving the industry and so forth. I've never seen, to come back to Russell's point, I've never seen any data that backs it up. I've seen a lot of lawyers, more experienced lawyers, saying, stuff this for a game of soldiers, I'm going to go consultant based, which brings with it its own problems. I think we've got a challenge in capacity. And it's not because people are leaving, it's because they're changing their working practices. Whereas before, if you had an experienced lawyer that was working in a firm, they may be running 60 to 80 files. Now, because they're consultants, they only have to run 4 or 5, or maybe 10, say, something like that, to get the same amount of money or more, or much more. And so a lot of capacity amongst the more experienced people has gone out of the market. And I think that's the challenge. It's not that I run a law firm. We've got 100 people. I've had one person leave in the last year to stop doing conveyancing. So it's a capacity problem, but it's caused by the shift away from the employed model, in my experience.
Say hello to Moneypenny. We're you when you can't be. Answering calls and qualifying leads, booking appointments, updating your case management system. We handle it all just like you would, with brilliant people, AI, or both. Visit moneypenny.co.uk today.
And a similar challenge that agents face, Russell. I mean, the growth of that consultant style is actually parallel to what's happening in conveyancing, isn't it?
It is, and it mirrors the US, Australia, many other markets actually, where we're quite the anomaly in Britain that we have employed agents, as in they are employed by an entity, whether it be they're a small independent, whether they're working for a kind of 20 or 30 branch bigger kind of semi-corporate entity, or indeed a proper corporate, as we would see Foxtons or Dexters or Connells Countrywide. Yeah, I mean, I'm going to take a bit of credit for this, by the way, obviously, just to make Peter laugh. There were some of us that foresaw an opportunity to kind of, I suppose, to approach estate agency differently on the basis that the consumer might want a bit more choice. And so back in 2007-8, some of us started what you will probably know as, many listening to this will know as, the online estate agency sector, as it became known. And actually, although that was an absolute disaster, and we can go into that if you really want to skewer me in terms of, why did you go bust? Where did the 27 million quid go? And all that. But what came out the other side of that was, I started eMove as it was in 2008. At the same time, roughly, House Network was started by Mark Reddings and Graham Locke. Adam Day started Hatched, and so on. What then happened 3 or 4 years later, Purple Bricks popped up, who are very, very well funded, had sat back watching the sector, looked at all the stuff we were doing well, all the stuff we weren't doing well, and improved upon that. Then roll forward 5, 6, 7 years. Although the cheap fee, the commoditization of estate agency hasn't really worked, with one notable exception, which is Verona Frankish at Yoba, who runs a very, very good online estate agency fixed fee business. But with that exception to one side, what the industry then realised was that, well, actually, maybe the cheap fee, the 500 quid fee, the 600 quid fee thing doesn't work, but having independent agents that are self-employed and are associated to a brand as a kind of an umbrella, a bit like they would if they were a mortgage broker, but they're going out and they're grabbing their own leads and they're looking after their own day-to-day, their own diary, their own, operational discipline and efficiency. And actually then, because they're on their own, they're taking and can justify taking the majority of the fee. That then gave birth to what we now know as EXP and Hortons and Keller Williams and TA UK, the agency. So what we've ended up with now is a fairly significant and rapidly growing self-employed model of estate agency. EXP lead that by a mile. They're nearly at 1,000 agents. So I suspect EXP's share of self-employed agents, it is about, I think they've got 80% of the entirety of self-employed estate agents in the UK. So it's growing, and it's effectively the American model, where the self-employed agent takes 70% of the fee, 30% goes to the platform. And I think it's a very exciting and interesting model. Because I think as an agent, you can earn what you're worth rather than taking 5% of the office profit, if you like. But also, I think if you're earning, let's say you're earning 3K of a 4K fee as an individual, you are much, much more likely to be focused and, good, if you like, when it comes to customer service, response, and so on. So it's good for the consumer, is my point. So it's happening and it's growing. Big question is how big self-employed estate agency gets. I mean, who knows? Does it become 10% of all agents, 20% of all agents? Well, if the US and Australia and others, and France and Germany and Italy, where self-employed is prominent and prevalent, where they're concerned, it could be the dominant model in UK estate agency in 10 years' time, maybe.
How do you think that's going to impact the relationship the estate agency market has with conveyancers? Because, and here's perhaps where we're going to start to hear some of the opinions that are going to come through, but not traditionally an area that has had a huge amount of collaboration. I mean, do you see that changing model could change the dynamic of the relationship between the two, Russell?
Yeah, I guess. I mean, there's always been, I suppose we should tell it how it is, shouldn't we, Peter? There's always been this uneasy cooperation between estate agents and conveyancers. The irony is, we're both side by side on the road, driving very similar vehicles in the same direction, but unfortunately often at different speeds, I think it's fair to say. And so there's been this kind of antagonism between the two because, the agent sees the conveyancer as slow and getting in the way, and the conveyancer sees the estate agent as a pain in the arse, blah, blah, blah. But they're actually all trying to do the same thing. So here's the first controversial point. That I'll put it to you, Peter Ambrose, that on the basis that the agent is a bit more agile than a conveyancer and maybe a little bit more, has a greater appetite for getting a deal done quicker. And you can argue because they've got more skin in the game in terms of their fee being higher than a conveyancer. The estate agent should do the conveyancing like they do in Florida. So that's not quite the question you asked, David, forgive me. But I think the opportunity for a Florida, what they call a no attorney state approach, which is where the agent writes the contract. There's a predetermined call-off period, contingency period, they call it, for inspections and so on. And then pretty much everything, and here's the magic wand. I mean, look, 25 minutes in, the magic wand is insurance, title insurance. Don't worry about searches anymore. Don't worry about, all the silly nonsense that you guys obsess about in terms of covenants and rubbish like that. Let's just cover it all with insurance and get these deals done in 2 weeks, not 2 years. I did look, by the way, and this is dead true. I went to ChatGPT 20 minutes before I started this conversation with you guys, David and Peter, and I asked ChatGPT without any skewing at all, which is the slowest market for property transactions on planet Earth. Guess what the answer was?
England, Wales.
England and Wales, yeah.
But we know that, Russ. We know that.
Well, I know. So, but we know it. But we've got to find a solution. And here's the first solution of the day.
First solution. I mean, love it. I think that's an amazing idea. Let's insure everything. Except, and here's the problem, right? In America, totally different land ownership process over there. Buying houses in America is a piece of cake because literally, as you say, you insure everything because they don't have the same concept of land ownership as we have in the UK. I wish we did. I wish, and you talk to any lawyer, I can tell you now, if we could offer insurance and wraparound insurance so that we didn't have to do all this work, absolutely, we'd bite your hand off for it. Unfortunately, we've got two problems. First of all, the ownership of land in this country is totally different, and we can try. I think you mentioned, I remember you talking about going back to Henry VIII, where they started it.
It is conveyance. Yeah, you lot as conveyancers, you exist because of the dissolution of the monasteries.
Exactly, but we have evolved, which is really good, and we can even stand up right now.
No, you haven't, though. Cool. Some of you still use quill pens, Peter.
We don't, Russell, and you know that.
Do.
However, the other
Inkwells
problem,
and quills.
the other problem, you have no evidence for that, and I don't count GPT memes as evidence.
Do you know, the other day I came across a conveyancing firm called the Brontosaurus Conveyancing Services Company because it's gone. Yeah, superseded by next door to Tyrannosaurus Rex Conveyancing Limited.
I don't think you did. I think you've made that up, and I will check on the SRO website. However, the other problem is the mortgage lenders. And everyone ignores the mortgage lender. But one thing that's, as you've seen, I'm sure you've seen in the last few days about this whole furore about the fact we have to pay £50, which, to be fair, I think we could afford, to access the CML lender's handbook. What was interesting was the reaction to it, where everyone decided that was the end of the world. It was quite funny. It was going to cost my firm about £1,500. I think I could probably wear that. But it was more the principle. And what people don't do is they don't take into account the importance of the lenders. We did have someone approach us a few years ago who said, I've got this, this will make you laugh, right? In fact, you'll probably take this idea. You ask 7 questions and then you buy wraparound insurance and you can buy a house. They were seriously selling this product. And then when we said to him, what about the lenders? He went, oh, and so he took his toys and he went home. And that's the problem. And the difference with the lenders here having the ownership is very different than in the States. And I wish it was simpler, but I think what a lot is misunderstood is the role of the lenders in the whole process. And it's tricky. And you've seen the power they exert.
What I find fascinating is I'd make the point, the Henry VIII point is a genuine point. I mean, literally, conveyancing emanates from the dissolution of the monasteries. It was the legal mechanism to prize away the monasteries from the Catholic Church and to put them into a wrapper, which then became the Church of England. So, I mean, and I'm only half joking when I say not much has changed, but even over the last 20 or 30 years, the time that I've been involved in estate agency and the property sector, I mean, think about the innovations in the world over the last 20 or 30 years, right? So if we were making cars today like we did in the 1970s, we'd still be driving around in Allegros and Austin Princesses. So, but your sector, I mean, largely the estate agency sector to an extent, although I think it has been blessed with a bit more technology efficiency, but the conveyancing sector, in terms of process, hasn't changed at all in the last 30, 50, 100 years.
Changed. I agree with you. It hasn't changed.
But don't you think we should do something about that, Pete?
Well, it's easy for you to say that, Russell, from your ivory tower. However, the problem is that, and we're doing this. We're going out, talk to people, and going, so we need to improve the way things work, and they go, but it's all right. One of the questions, actually, it's interesting. Well, one of the questions that David, he's gone silent on us now and he's not bringing it up, but he raised this, right? He said, why haven't we solved these problems already? I tell you why, because they're not big enough.
But for whom? They're not big enough for what? Government?
But they're not
That's
big enough for
sure.
lawyers. They're not big enough for lawyers. They don't, it's like, well, it's okay. It's good enough. And we see this a lot. I remember talking to an agent actually talking about referral fees whilst we're on the subject. Okay. And they said, oh, we want to use you. You're really good. The people we've got at the moment aren't very good. And I said, okay, fine. But they're paying us £300. We want you to pay that. And I went, no, I don't want to pay that. I want to pay less than that. And they went, oh, you know what? We'll keep the £300 because it's good enough.
Yeah, there's some maths that agent needs to do in terms of transaction times.
Yeah,
and
he wasn't having that. Yeah, he wasn't having that. But the point being, and I think that's it, and I've said this before in the past, the reason why things haven't changed is because it's good enough. And you can complain and you can say 120 days, it's too long. But you know what?
It's not 120. Pete, I wish it was 120. According to ChatGPT, your industry now is responsible for average transaction times in England and Wales of 176 days.
That is nonsense. You can't trust
you're saying ChatGPT's wrong?
I just say
I hope not, because I've just booked a load of restaurants in Dubai using ChatGPT. So what am I going to turn up to? You can't rely on ChatGPT.
I think that's exaggeration, but the point is, in all seriousness, it's people talk about the broken system. Yeah, it's not broken. And it's a bit inefficient, but it's not broken enough.
You guys, you get used.
We get paid anyway. You're going to say this. You get paid anyway.
Yeah, so you don't think it's a problem because it doesn't matter to you. Imagine this. And sorry, David's shaking his head and putting his hands up. But just one quick point. If you could get people moved in a month rather than 6 months, do we think there'd be more transactions in the UK? Because I think there would be, and that would therefore be better for the consumer, but also better commercially for estate agents and conveyancers. David's nodding.
I think you're talking about the myth of delays kill deals. It's the myth, and we all know this, but no one talks about it.
Ladies and gentlemen, herein lies the problem with conveyancing, is because people like Peter Ambrose don't think there's a problem with conveyancing. There was a guy that ran the TVR motor company, right? And TVRs were a wonderful car, except for the fact they broke down all of the bloody time. And when a journalist said to him, do you not think you should fix these cars? He said, what do you mean? What's wrong with them? They said, well, they're littered across the M1 on the basis that they just break down all the time. And he said, I don't know what you're talking about. There's no problem with my cars. So guess what? Because he didn't acknowledge the problem, TVRs didn't get fixed. Guess what happened to TVR? They went bust.
This episode is sponsored by Compass. Compass removes SDLT exposure for conveyancing firms with a fully outsourced, indemnity-backed service. We take responsibility for SDLT calculations and HMRC submissions, not your team. Clear accountability and complete confidence on every transaction. Find out more at compass.tech.
How much of the issue, Peter, is due to, and talking about process, but is due to the legislative roadblocks that are there? And I mean, to the point about lenders, I think that's a very fair comment that you make. And how much, in your view, is down to the issue that conveyancers may not be as engaged with the future as Russell is making the point?
No, I don't think it's about being engaged with the future. It's about, you've got to remember what lawyers do. Lawyers do risk management. So if you say to them, right, we need to change, and people then go, lawyers, they're really resistant to change. Well, I hope they're resistant to change, because change introduces risk.
And then change the risk.
No, I'm really confused now. I don't know what that means.
Well, look, therein lies the problem again. We're getting to the nub of it, aren't we?
With your clever weasel words, you've confused me now. I don't know what change the risk means.
Change the risk. So if you're worried about the risk, and I understand that, you're worried about being sued and your professional indemnity insurance going from $8,000 a year to $50,000 a year or whatever. Yeah. If the risk relates to either not conveying a clear title, or indeed the lender saying, you cocked up there, Pete, and that's cost us $80,000 and we're suing you. What about if there was a mechanism in place where that risk was taken away and again was put in the lap of the insurance companies? Then you wouldn't have to worry so much.
That's a really good point. And I, for one, I'm a great believer in insurance. I'll give you a really good example. Okay, we've just started using this product. I won't name them to spare their blushes, whatever. But basically, they're doing stamp duty returns. The only reason we're using them is because they're insurance backed. Yeah. Now we could do it, okay, because the problem being is that if something messes up, would they come after us? So when this was proposed to me, I went, fine, bite a hand off. And I think we need more of these individual elements where they're insurance backed. You're absolutely right. The problem being, however, is that a lot of the crunchy bit in the middle, it's difficult to insure against. I always call insurance or indemnity policies the agent's friend. Yeah, get a policy. Okay, you can only insure against quantifiable risk, and we do see a lot of misunderstanding on that. I think people should use insurance more. I agree with you. I do. An interesting point you raised earlier about searches and why we still use those. Can I be honest?
And how many have proved to be bad, Pete?
Yeah, I mean, I've had one case where, we've done 35,000, yeah? We had one case whereby the search came back and it said it was listed, the property was listed, okay? Client moved in, we got a stinging rebuke about 3 months later. I've been to the council, it's not listed, how dare you? We're like, we haven't had any loss, so what are you going to do about it? It's just all shouty and sweary and everything like that. But the search was wrong. But there was no loss. But that's one. Seriously, it's.
Was this a local authority search that you waited 4 months for?
Well, it was Canterbury, so it was a few weeks. But it was.
Is it Portsmouth, Plymouth? I mean, they're still kind of 2 or 3 months.
Well, so, if you live in Hackney, you can't get a search at all.
Yeah, so that's another part of the problem. But isn't it interesting that, most conveyancers, when I ask them this question, okay, in your career, how many searches have proved to be bad? I don't think I've had anybody say to me, oh, loads. I mean, none.
It's very rare. But
it's a pointless process, so get rid of them.
Okay, so I've got a question for you, okay? And this I was doing some training yesterday with an agent because we do that. And one thing that came up, we were talking about Hackney Council right now. Hackney Council had a cyber attack 4 years ago. I'm sure you're aware of this, okay? So you can't do searches at Hackney, right? Okay?
The lenders... So it had 4 years ago. They still fixed it?
No. It's hard.
It's a Labour-controlled authority, isn't it?
I haven't checked.
It is. It is. Come on, let's be honest.
I haven't checked. But here's a really interesting point, okay, to your point, okay? If you buy a property in Hackney now, okay, you can then use insurance. Yeah, you can use insurance because the lenders have gone, oh, that's all right then.
Because you have to.
Because you have to, that's right.
Well, and what do they say?
Because you have to.
Is it necessity is the
mother of all invention? Exactly. So what the lenders, so get this right, and I can't explain this, right? The lenders have gone, well, it's Hackney, so that's okay. Well, okay, why don't we go to Lambeth and why don't we go to Wandsworth or why don't we go to Harrogate and go, well, if it's in those places, that's okay. All you need to do is have a load of councils get hacked and have their systems go down, and then we won't need searches anymore.
We couldn't possibly condone that. So we're knocking these problems down with solutions like Skittles here, ladies and gentlemen, aren't we? Do you know what we should do? The three of us get in a room with a couple of lenders and a couple of insurance companies, and I reckon by about 4 o'clock that day, we would have changed the entire approach to conveyancing in Britain. Why don't we do that?
Well, I mean, I love the idea of it.
Well, we could have a drink afterwards. That'd be good.
No, that's not doing it for me.
Right, dinner?
Now you're talking.
One of the challenges that, and I'm going to dive in here, one of the challenges I think we recognise that we face is that the consumer is very rarely at the heart of the transaction. Now, the agent is going to turn around and tell me, no, we have them at our very core, and the conveyancer is going to say the same thing. But fundamentally, if you look at what consumers want and need, the current process is very divorced from that. And it kind of starts with agency, doesn't it, Russell?
It starts with managing expectations, yeah. So never will you hear an estate agent in the lounge telling the reality to a would-be seller. Right, okay, you're going to have loads of problems. Going to tell you that now. You've got a 35% chance of your transaction falling through. That's going to cost you a few quid. Buyers mess around relentlessly. Oh, and by the way, I'm here to list your home, but you'll never see me again. I'm now going to pass you over to a 19-year-old trainee that sits at the back of the office. And I know you want to be moved. It's September. You want to be moved by Christmas. We might get you moved by Christmas next year. That's basically the truth. That is the truth for all sorts of reasons. And you're not going to hear estate agents say that because they would never get a listing, would they? So managing expectations is very, very important. Agents are doing what they're designed to do, which is, yes, to get people moved, and to do that on the basis that they get paid only on success. So they only get paid if the deal completes. And actually, here's a stat for you. Only about half of the properties listed for sale in the UK ever complete. So you have to do, let's say if you're good, 4 valuations to list 2 properties, right? So you've already wasted your time on 2 valuations. And out of those 2, only 1 will complete. But you might sell both, but you'll have 3 months of aggravation, and then it will fall through, maybe because the buyer pulls out or the seller gets made redundant, or probably because the conveyancer cocks up and takes 7 months to get your house transaction through. It's normally the latter, by the way. And then ultimatums fly around and it all goes horribly wrong. So yes, there is a disconnect, I guess, is the point, between what the agent says and what the seller and buyer expect in terms of the smoothness and the timing around a transaction.
In what other industries, though, is that even remotely acceptable as an expectation management piece? Because here we're throwing the conveyancers under the bus before we've even got them on the route.
Yeah, no, but the agent would say, look, we're at the behest, they can list it and sell it, in 4 or 5 weeks, but then it's going to take 6 months to go through. That's not the agent's fault, is it? I mean, that's clearly let's not say the conveyancer's fault, it's the process's fault. But I also feel very strongly that the conveyancing industry should do something to provide solutions to those problems. So what other industry? Well, this is why estate agents have a bad name. They're not bad people. They're just trying to do a job and trying to get paid, both as a company and as individuals. But they end up being kind of labelled in the same category as traffic wardens and tabloid journalists. And well, I can say politicians, but politicians are firmly at the bottom of the pile now, aren't they, in terms of desirability? But they've got to play the deck they're dealt.
I think what's interesting, and I'll put it out there, okay, and this is controversial, unlike Russell's just red rag stuff, yeah. The solution that people have suggested, this information, this material information up front that's going to make it all quicker. I've never been a big fan of this for the exact reason that you've said, Russell, which is deals would go through far more quickly if all the information was made available up front. And to your point, if you're sitting there and we get all this information, all the problems that they've had and the issues with the lease and the problems with this and the problems with that, and you present that to a buyer and you go, this house is going to fly through now because we've got this information up front, and you can make what they call an informed decision, okay? Most buyers are going to go, hell no. And I think one of the interesting things I find is where people at the moment, the only offer on the table to improve the process, the only one, is upfront information. It's the only one, right? My opinion is more information up front will scare off buyers. I don't know what you think, but I think
you think it's a misnomer. No, I'm probably.
I think it will.
For once, I'm in violent agreement with you, Peter. I think I think you're talking about, again, expectation, and there's a debate here where 6 months is too long to get a deal through from offer to completion. But maybe 3 weeks is a bit too quick, right? Because you've got to upend your life into, kids out of school and finances. And of course, the other problems that you are not, as a conveyancing sector, in control of are the local authority searches, as we talked about, although I think we found a way of circumventing those thanks to Hackney.
The average is only 9 days, so that's actually a myth.
Is it 9 days as an
9
average,
days across
or was that the best?
Average. No, average. No.
But then you've got those
same day, but
and then you've got those pesky lenders. So the pesky lenders that put the gun to your head, and when you ring them and say, "Are you okay with this risk?" They say, "Are you?" Are you?
I'm glad you're on our side, Russell. It's good. They only took 40 minutes to come round to recognise our problems that we have.
Well, that doesn't mean I'm apathetic like your industry, which is let's just live with it. Let's just live with it because it's akin to the whole Henry VIII thing, and back to quills and running mail around by horseback, which some of you lot actually still do. I'm sure you don't use email, you use horses. So I'm all about solutions, guys. I mean, I really am. Yeah. I'm desperately keen for the process in Britain, whether it comes from the inside out, as in the conveyancing sector or the estate agency sector, or a third party that comes up with some technology, but I don't think technology to be all and end all because of the process that you have to go through, or government legislation. What do we think about governments, whether it be this one, who seems to have rather a lot of other things on their hands at the moment, like sacking Lord Mandelson and goodness knows what else, abusing pensioners, farmers, business people, publicans, that kind of thing. So when they're finished doing that, maybe this government might turn their attention to getting the house moving process more finessed.
I think nothing surprised me more than when the government announced they were going to have that investigation into the house buying and selling process. You remember everyone got the flags out. We had like a parade up the road because the government was going to start this investigation, right? I can tell you now, right, it's coming to naught, that one there. It's just a load of chit-chat and so forth.
It was under Angela Rayner, wasn't it? And she's gone anyway. I think Steve Reed's picked up the baton, isn't it?
It's going nowhere. And I don't think you'll ever see, not in my lifetime, government intervention, even though they talk about it. We'll see. I just don't think that would happen. I think if you look at the only country where they've actually changed the process that I've seen is Australia. And if you go back 15 years, and what they did was they mandated that people would use a single payment system. And so, for example, you see people like PEXA who've come over here, and there's a really interesting example, right? So PEXA basically upended the way that deals were done in Australia. Amazing, made it all streamlined. 90% of the market used the same platform. Fantastic. They came over here and they've got 2 lenders now that are actually even just trialing it. Okay, because and why? Because it's not been mandated, and they've realised how difficult it is, and it is difficult. So I don't think that you're ever going to get a government mandation. You're never going to get a universal platform where everyone goes, blimey, I'm signing up for that. That's amazing. So what you have to do, I think it's definitely going to come. I don't think also the public marching with their feet. That's the other thing. People say the public will start to choose lawyers based on their service delivery. Nah, that's nonsense.
No, they won't, because unfortunately the buyers and sellers dip their toe into the property water way too infrequently, every 10 or 12 years.
And they forget, it's like childhood, and they forget about it.
Yeah, exactly. So and it's just painful, actually. The conveyancing sector, you're right.
I think it's more painful. I don't know, close call that one.
No. But what about maybe if we had a housing minister that actually had some housing experience? Wouldn't that be a wonderful revelation?
But it's not going to happen.
It might be. Maybe it'll be me. It might be me.
Really?
What? Why are you laughing? Why does the thought of me being the country's housing secretary fill you with joviality? And why are you mocking me?
Then? Is reform getting in then?
Oh, come on. What do you think? Should we turn this to politics? Absolutely. Spiked another 2% in the polls over the last few days. So, yes, reform are forming the next government.
We've come full circle. We've come full circle because we'd solved everything. We'd got insurance involved. We'd solved the lender problem.
Got rid of searches.
We've solved searches, and suddenly we're back to square one, Peter, because we're saying that government intervention isn't going to happen, that technology isn't going to solve this issue.
I think technology will.
Reached the point of the discussion that I'm not quite
the
sure.
Unsolvable problem.
Yeah. No. Are we trying to boil the ocean?
No, when we are, obviously. No, I didn't say technology is not going to solve the problem. I can tell you now, categorically, technology will solve this problem, 100%. 100% is where it comes from and how it's applied. So my idea was this single universal platform is never going to happen, right? But what you are going to end up with is you are going to end up with systems that talk to one another. It's going to be a caring, sharing, loving experience where people say, I'm using this particular technology and it can talk to that particular technology. The key is that no single person will own that. And that's the challenge. So you've got people coming into the market now who want to try and own the infrastructure. That's never going to happen because a lot of law firms either don't have any systems, or if they do, they're 20 years old, they can't connect, and there's a horrible legacy of that. But I think definitely technology is the only solution.
Well, but Peter, I mean, you and I have had conversations in the past about technology, and I know that you're a big fan, an advocate, and a user of such. I mean, do you think that with the rise of AI, that there will come a time in the not too distant future where AI itself can solve the problem of the housing market? I mean, if an AI for the buyer talks to the AI for the conveyancer, who talks to the AI for the lender, and the AI for the insurance company, within 3 nanoseconds, all of a sudden you've got a completed transaction. I mean,
that is not crazy talk. I know you sound like a crazy man from Essex right now, okay, but that is not crazy talk.
It's not though, is it?
It's not at all.
Did you see, as a brief comedic aside, so 3rd of February today, did you see the front page of the Metro today? So the front page of the Metro with regard to AI bots is there is now an AI social network that is for AI bots only, no humans. And there are 150,000 AI bots in that particular social chat room. And guess what they're talking about? They're talking about how to bring about the eradication of humans.
Yes. Yeah.
Seriously.
It is.
That's happened completely naturally. So I think if they can 100%. Wipe out the human race, I mean, surely they can solve the problem of conveyancers.
50-50 again.
Well, in fact, if we wipe out the human race, maybe we should start with conveyancers.
I mean, that's actually the first funny thing you've said all day.
Well, it's like that joke, isn't it? 5,000 conveyancers on the bottom of the ocean. What do you call it?
A good start.
A good start.
I think that is probably the safest place to find a way to end this conversation, and not because we've ended on a particularly sour note or anything along those lines, but more that I think what we've demonstrated through the course of this conversation with Morecambe and Wise or Hale and Pace, depending on your take, is that this is it's not a great unsolvable, but this is not a simple solution. There are no simple solutions to this particular problem, issue, challenge, whatever you might want to call it. And to Peter's point, we still move 1.2 million people a year, or more than that. We move 1.2 million houses a year. So is the system broken? Yes. Is it broken enough? Perhaps not. But as we are out of time, we're not going to get much more chance to say a huge amount more. It just leaves me to thank both Peter and Russell for their time, insight, and comedic value as well. Thank you both.
A pleasure. Hopefully we have provoked some thought in the minds of, those that are relevant to this particular problem that we're seeking to solve.
I'm just glad that Russell's here to save us.
You're welcome.
The Today's Conveyancer podcast is available on your preferred podcast provider. It's also available on todaysconveyancer.co.uk. Thank you to Peter and to Russell. Thank you as ever for listening, and we'll see you again soon.